The King of the Battlefield Chapter 111. Chapter 111, Those Who Seek Death Shall Live, 1. TL, Nadu. Editor, Lee Suras. Gasp. Ha. Myung took a big breath in and out. His stamina and mental power were being used rapidly. However, he couldn't just stand there and be absent-minded. If he received few thousand streams of lasers on his bare body, an attack that could be called a natural disaster, his whole body wouldn't survive. Above all, a shape that seemed like a scaled-down planet, the few thousands of eyes on the shape looked for Myung. Baron was supposed to find the summoner first. Kaioo. However, an attack from close up. There would no way for the attack to not reach the malignant tumor. Although it recovered, as if it was extremely mad, the malignant tumor spurted out red spores. The red spores flew towards Baron and stuck to it. Klaeonk. They exploded instantly as they stuck to it. Baron, that was looking for Myung, couldn't help but hesitate. Although it looked for the summoner first, it couldn't just ignore being attacked. Soon, all the undead made by the malignant tumor and the 3 offensive tumors, all started to move to annihilate Baron. Even though it was only attacked once, the malignant tumor realized that the most dangerous being at this place was Baron. All of Baron's eyes also focused on the malignant tumor. Clang! Crash! Kraeonk! Even if it was so, since the area of attack was quite large, it was hard to just spectate. As if meteors had fallen, numerous craters were created all around. It's a relief. Either way, it meant that the summoning of Baron was the right choice. He seemed to understand why it was forbidden. Even if it was the first time he saw it, he realized he needed to use it more carefully. Make way! Get back! From every direction, undead gathered and the Rain's invincible force started to quickly leave their position. With Essen's order, they resisted the wave of undead. While reducing his presence as most he could, Myung quietly followed the path that they opened. But, Essen didn't just avoid the undead. To use this opportunity, Essen used his head. I'm better off with this situation. The malignant tumor and the unknown monsters fight. Within that time, the main body, the disordered terror, was defenseless. Of course, there was one defensive tumor. The thing that protects the disordered terror with its huge mountain-like form. It had the immunity effect on almost every attack. Not just that, but the malignant tumor continuously kept a close eye on the main body. That was why there was a need to get rid of the malignant tumor first. However, due to the fight with the malignant tumor and the monster, the main body was now defenseless. The defensive tumor was like the name itself for defense. If it's me, I can get through it. Essen specialized in breaking through barriers or seals. He thought that he could get rid of the defensive tumor while the malignant tumor was occupied. Essen took out a talisman. Our target is the disordered terror. From now on, we will resume our plan. Rib. As he ripped the talisman, a fog-like substance appeared on every member's body. The fog slowly removed their existence. Afterwards, no one could find them as they completely disappeared into their surroundings. Except for one person. After finding out the movements of the Rain's invincible force, the corners of Myung's mouth rose. He quickly found out where they were headed. They are planning to attack the disordered terror during this time. It wasn't a bad decision. Since they would know more information about the disordered terror than him, they were going to freely take the disordered terror while the malignant tumor fought the Baron. But, would that really go their way? Taken, it's now your turn. After stopping for a moment, he called over all the undead that survived. Taken raised his sword. His turn had finally come. What do I need to do? Hunt all the humans hiding in the surrounding mountain. The soldiers of the 5 great clans who were hiding within the mountain range. If they were to be left alive, they would become variables. He refused to worry about that afterwards. And to assign this work, Taken was the right choice. since he had the highest intelligence among the undead and could use numerous evil spirits. Human hunting. He didn't seem to like it very much, but it wasn't completely unacceptable either. Since he had mostly been watching until now, his body was itching. Take Sword 3 and the King Mutant. You will need to move as effectively as possible. It's sufficient for me to go alone. I'm not doubting your skills. But, there are a larger number of people hiding. Taken, what I mean is for you to give orders and strike the locations where the humans might be hiding at once. You mean for me to use both strategy and tactics? Well, for an intellectual king like myself, the two are both indispensable things. Taken had a grand goal, to raise his own empire in this world. This was also the reason why he called himself king and was stuck up. In reality, Taken was strong. Muyong knew that he had become much stronger than when he was fighting against the Swordbone Trio. And Taken didn't really hide it either. When it comes to secret weapons, he is one. As if he now had some interest, Taken nodded his head. Wait for me. I will hunt down every last one of the humans hiding in the mountains. Within that human range, Muyong was also included, but Taken didn't think Muyong was a human. He thought that the reason why the horns disappeared was a type of side effect. Soon, Taken quickly moved with the King Mutant and Sword 3. Heidegger and Sword 2. You two follow me. Heidegger and Sword 2 also faced a lot of changes. A talisman. The key item needed to make a miracle, an item that can also produce divine energy. At first, he thought it was odd for the soldiers of the 5 great clans to show up at this mountain. Even after knowing that the disordered terror was like a bomb that could explode at any minute, they sent their elites and searched for the thing that they were after. He realized that their goal was a talisman. If it was a talisman, it was totally worth the trouble. Rather, if this information was to spread, worst men would come to this mountain. Muyong was most worried about the actions of the holy city Malalan. Even Muyong didn't know the specifics about Malalan and their 100,000 priests. They barely involved themselves in foreign relations, and only those who had permission could enter Malalan. It was a territory of non-aggression and a holy place, so there was no way for Muyong, an assassin, to request or enter the place. Everything's mine. Either way, the disordered terror had a talisman. Since the disordered terror's parent was naturally Muyong's, you could say the disordered terror and the talisman were both his. And with Heidegger and Sword 2, it should be enough for Muyong to attack the Rain's invincible force from behind. Bang! Bang! Rumble! The fight between the malignant tumor and Baron devastated everything in their surroundings. The top ranks of monsters were categorized into 5 stages, and among them, they were both monsters that would be considered to be in the very last one, the 5th stage. As these two monsters they could not be a match against unless they were among the top 10 strongest humans, fought each other. The very first to act were the humans within the mountains. The Lawless, Rain, and Beast clans. This is our golden opportunity. We will take back the spirit of the Armful's cradle. The elites of the Lawless clan came here just to take back the spirit. Of course, not the ancient darkness spirit, the disordered terror. To suppress the disordered terror, they gave it the spirit of the Armful's cradle. From the beginning, the Lawless clan produced the disordered terror, but they were also cultivating other spirits. Among them, the disordered terror and the Armful's cradle were 2 that produced the most results. However, the spirit of the Armful's cradle wasn't fully cultivated. In the end, it wasn't able to fully suppress the disordered terror. They needed to regain it. The spirit of the Armful's cradle. To be exact, a talisman. Shade. As they were quickly moving, there was a shadow that suddenly swarmed in from their surroundings. At first, they thought it was a shade, a shadow form monster, but it felt strange. It felt darker and close to evil. They were evil spirits. And the evil spirits gathered to create a black circle, and a death knight appeared as he was created from above the circle. A knight that had a sword and thin black armor. A death knight. Did the malignant tumor even make a Death Knight? It's just one monster. Get him! The elites of the lawless class started to attack the Death Knight, Taken. Swoosh! Taken took out his sword. Then, the sword resonated. It was similar to Sword 3's resonation but slightly different. Taken was resonating with the world. It was to try and minimize all his movements. What was considered totally impossible as an undead being, he had done it himself. Not just that. The wind flowed beneath Taken's feet. Taken stepped on the wind. He assimilated with the wind. This was the skill Sword 2 used to run, a light body technique. Clang! Clank! Taken's sword moved fluently, like a flowing stream. He showed perfect swordplay as if he was going to destroy everything. He moved without the slightest error and ignored the attacks of his enemies. It was an example of Sword 1's self-controlled swordsmanship. Also, Taken's sword instantly slowed down before it sped up. This is still a bit hard. He was able to replicate everything else except Muyong's ability to manipulate time. That, he couldn't copy. A method where you seemed to be moving slowly yet overpowering the enemy in an instant. It was marvelous the more he looked at it. Although the source was from Kingslayer's movements were harder to get the feel of than Muyong's. Either way, if he was to learn this, he felt like he could understand a bit of the King Mutant's way of storing time, but it seemed like he needed more time to achieve understanding. As he smacked his lips as if he felt sad, before he was aware of it, dead bodies piled up. Taken, wasn't defeated. I am just paving the road to become much stronger. Then, Taken turned around and looked at the King Mutant and Sword 3. Taken was the king of evil spirits. A king who preyed upon evil spirits and ruled over them. You couldn't call someone a king if they stagnated. You also couldn't say that being in deep despair because of defeat was a quality of a king. Taken was getting stronger even in this moment. Like Muyong's speed, steeply. He had no qualms about getting rid of the old and accepting new things. Since it was Taken's goal to become a much stronger and much firmer king. If the king faltered or was ignorant, the country would also break down. Although it hadn't been long since he was defeated fighting in vain against the Swordbone Trio, compared to back then, Taken was definitely much different now. It felt like the screams echoed in the mountain range. Muyong soon dismissed his concerns. If it was Taken, he would surely complete Muyong's orders. Taken is somewhat like me. That he tries to become stronger. That he doesn't disregard any means of gaining strength. Muyong left him alone. After learning from the Swordbone Trio, Taken even tried to steal his way of controlling grains, but it wasn't something that could be copied even if he saw it. Instead, Taken became anxious and couldn't help but to follow Muyong. Perhaps, he might continue to be a faithful slave for a longer time than Muyong expected. Anyways. Muyong turned his head. The defensive tumor, rivaling the size of an entire mountain, screamed out. The defensive shield was broken through. The Rain's invincible force had succeeded. Although they had exhausted close to half of their stamina, they were uplifted. Soon, the main body of the disordered terror appeared. The middle was shining. It was a trace of the talisman. Let's go. Swoosh. Muyong took out Anguish. Although they freely aimed for the disordered terror as Muyong summoned the Baron, they ignored the fact that behind them, there was Muyong. Even if they did know of Muyong's presence, it didn't seem like they thought any further, that Muyong was after the talisman and their backs. They were in a hurry and Muyong was laid back. This difference would make an irreversible result. Chapter 112, Those Who Seek Death Shall Live, 2. TL, Nadu. Editor, Lee Suras. The disordered terror was truly grotesque. A giant creature over 10 meters tall was curled up, and as if it had received burns, its entire skin was peeled off. A spear full of light was stuck in it. Although its eyes were both closed, blood continuously flowed down. a form that resembled more of a mummy than a monster. However, the wings on its back caught more of his attention. Was it a hybrid? There were wings, one black and the other white. A form that reminded him of a mixed race of an angel and a devil. However, it was the first time Wei-ung saw wings like these besides Saint Snow. But, the disordered terror was helpless. After removing the defensive tumor, there was only a weak monster that was continuously in pain. The shining light spear near the heart would probably be the talisman. As Wei-ung approached, the very first to notice was Essen, the big master of the rain's invincible force. You are? Essen's eyes widened. The man who had fought the malignant tumor and released the strange spirit was in front of him. Why? Were their goals the same? Although he looked similar to a human, Essen didn't think he was one. It was because humans were unable to control undead freely like him. He also gave off a strange vibe. Even if the man was human, Essen thought that the man would try to get rid of the malignant tumor first, but that didn't seem to be true either. What is the Rain clan trying to do with it? As Wei-ung asked while pointing towards the defenseless disordered terror, Essen knitted his brows. You seem to know about us. I know everyone who hides like some rat. It seems like the disordered terror was made in collaboration of the three clans. No. Wei-ung spoke of his hypothesis. However, he believed it was highly likely. The Rain, Lawless, and Beast clan weren't hostile towards each other. On top of that, for one clan to cultivate spirits and to find hosts, they would have to endure lots of blood loss and sacrifices. Unless they truly did find Bi Sungmin by good fortune, at least few hundreds to some few thousands of people would have died. An act that would eventually be discovered by others. Once discovered, it would become a reason for them to be attacked by all the other groups. Would one clan be able to bear that alone and resolve it? Impossible. Wei-ung inwardly shook his head. No matter if it was a clan from the Great Five Clans, if they didn't have the cooperation of the other clans, it would be impossible. Even more. Within that mummy-like monster, there were three things. The disordered terror, the light-type spirit, and Bi Sungmin. The three didn't blend in together and continuously produced division. Either way, there was no way for the Lawless clan to find and cultivate the disordered terror and the equally strong spirit of light alone. At least Wei-ung knew better than anyone else that they didn't have the structure to do so. Joint work of the three clans. However, they failed and all three took a different route. This was most reasonable. Even the fact that only members of these three clans out of the 5 great clans appeared and that there was no other military strength around was all circumstantial evidence. You bastard, who sent you? Essen's voice got quieter. His reaction was enough. He was skilled at hiding his emotions, but he couldn't be better than Wei-ung. An extremely subtle tremor was found in his breath. Wei-ung didn't seem to be incorrect, at least. The composition of power would be interesting from now on. And due to Essen's reaction, Wei-ung couldn't help but chuckle. The three clans tried, but they all failed. However, they would continuously be suspicious of one another. They might even start a war. It was possible that they would send military forces to investigate the situation, and in doing so there was a probability that they could find out about Wei-ung's existence. But, as they were deeply suspicious of the other clans, they would fight to find out whose clan he belonged to. Of course, even their alliance would disappear. If coincidentally related information was to be released, they would be busy trying to point each other out as suspects. If the holy city Malalan was to also act, at least 1 out of 3 clans would definitely be destroyed. The same thing might happen even if other guilds were to be aware, but there was a possibility for a transition of power to occur. Humanity was dormant. They resided in their territory and were busy seeking their own profit. Although they had produced many of great strength, this strength was gradually left to rot. If Wei-ung's predictions were correct and the bloodbath was to happen, then this wasted strength would be refocused on other things, opening up the possibility of a new wave. Out of all the big groups, one would disappear. If that happened, the competition would become fierce. And to fill in the gap of that group, a countless number of groups would rise. Of course, it wasn't just optimism. In the worst case, a large group would come to an agreement, but that possibility was extremely low. Since there would be more than one group that would want to show off the strength that they've reserved for decades. This would be interesting. Essen was puzzled. He spoke as if he was a third party who didn't care at all. In reality, it didn't really matter. Essen had no doubt in his mind that Muyong belonged to either the Lawless or Beast clan. Muyong held Anguish. Heidegger, Sword 2. Besides that man, get rid of the rest. I understand. I will execute your order. Heidegger was the man who kidnapped people and kept them as slaves in the territory Muyong was currently ruling. However, he became an undead because of Muyong and was faithfully following him. He was able to switch his heart, and depending on the heart used, he was able to use a different ability. And currently, Heidegger was using the twin-head ogre's heart. Compared to other undead, it was slightly lacking, but Heidegger was fully able to complete one man's worth of workload. The rest of the lacking parts would be fulfilled by Sword 2. I'll take care of that man. Anguish pointed towards Essen. At the remark that seemed to disregard him, Essen's eyes trembled. Since I have a lot of things I'm curious about, I won't kill you. So, Essen reacted to his remark. He held a long black spear and pointed the shaft towards Muyong. Swift. The two instantly disappeared. Essen's spear was sharp. His skills had been polished over a good 20 years. Not everyone could become the big master of the most elite troops. One throw of the spear was so exact that it could even take someone's life away. Clang! The sword and spear clashed. Sparks flew and their positions changed. They exchanged attacks 10 times. He's strong. They were basically poking around. Also, Muyong was trying to figure out about how much of his current skills would work against him. Essen was a big shot who could definitely be in the top 500 humans. However, Muyong blocked Essen's attack every time. I can see. Muyong was able to see the grains. Simply by stats, Essen would be superior, but Muyong had the eyes that could see grains. The grains were arranged in a certain direction. Everything had their own unique grains. Essen's attack also showed a certain wave. As his attack continuously got blocked, Essen withdrew his spear. I acknowledge that you have quite a decent skill. But, not enough. And changed his spear. As he stretched his hand, a crack was created in midair and a brown spear came down. There was no one who I couldn't beat with the life-eating spear. If you don't want to become pierced by this spear like a skewer, it's best for you to surrender even now. A spear that gave off a completely ominous feeling. Truly, it felt like it wasn't going to be an easy fight if he used that spear. However, it wasn't like Muyong also didn't have any cards up his sleeve. Muyong was able to see grains. He accelerated grains. Soon, the whole world started to become slower. Grr! His body changed and 2 horns appeared. Like a beast, a growling sound naturally popped out of his mouth. A Dakibi. Essen's eyes widened. He wondered if it was a transformation-related skill, but his presence alone had changed. He was similar to a Dakibi, but he was incomparable. A Duoxini? It felt the same. He had no idea what that appearance was supposed to mean. Tap. As if he stopped, he stood there with anguish in his hand. And after that moment, Muyong was near Essen in no time. Bang! As anguish and the spear met each other, it created an explosion. Essen's body also shook. He's fast. Essen felt a big impact. The opponent he thought had stopped was attacking him before he knew. Essen fixed his eyes on Muyong. And once again, Muyong disappeared. Bang! Bang! Although he was barely successful in blocking Muyong's attacks, his hand had become crushed. Essen ground his teeth. You bastard! Slash! They missed each other once. Essen wasn't naive enough to be attacked with the same attack continuously. Essen's spear pierced Muyong's chest. You are too absorbed in attacking. Aren't you too negligent in blocking? Essen mocked as he smiled. Cough. Muyong coughed up blood. However, Muyong's spirit didn't die off at all. He doesn't even know he had already died. What? Slosh. Both of his arms were cut off, and his body started to fall apart into dozens of sliced pieces. Blood poured out from his whole body, drenching his surroundings. Afterwards, Essen's body that had turned into mere slices of meat fell to the ground. 55 seconds. If he took 5 more seconds, he might have been too late. In a world that was 4 times faster, he doubled the time for a short while by using his Hermes's boots. It didn't multiply by 2, but the world became a total of 5 times faster. However, this was enough to win against Essen. Swoog. Muyong took out the spear that was in his chest after looking at the corpse. Clank. And after tossing the spear on the ground, he used his cry of fire skill to cauterize his wound. He felt a grievous pain, but he endured it. Instead, he turned his head and looked at his surroundings. Sword 2 and Heidegger were performing very well. They were almost finished. Once again, as he returned to human form and retracted his horns, symptoms of severe dehydration followed. All his muscles quickly constricted. But, he didn't pass out. Then, stomp. Muyong walked properly. The disordered terror plotted. And it was at that moment when he faced the disordered terror. Swoosh. The darkness imprinted within the heart of the disordered terror became intense. The darkness ate up the light, and as if it was going to encroach the world, it extended its scope and afterwards even engulfed Muyong. I'm now complete. I have eaten up the talisman and the spirit of light, and became an existence with the strength of a demigod. There was nothing besides darkness in his surroundings. In the middle of it, the disordered terror cried out loud. A huge shadow that looked like it touched the sky. A black whirlpool of emotions that didn't feel anything else besides evil. Offer your body to me. The body that fits me most in this place. The shadow stretched its feet. Crash. Muyong quickly moved back. He lifted his left arm and breathed out the Azura King's breath. Pop. However, the Azura King's breath didn't produce a big blow. Useless. I'm already an existence of a demigod. I won't be harmed by an attack produced by a mere human. This black space seemed to be similar to a distinct barrier. Inside it, the disordered terror was basically undefeatable. Muyong bit his lips. He had already used most of his strength in facing Essen. He thought that the disordered terror would become completely defenseless, but he never expected that it would absorb more strength in the meantime. Once again, he summoned all his undead. However, as the disordered terror stretched out its hand, all the souls of the undead were all swept away. The hell horse was stuck outside the barrier that it was unable to enter. This will be difficult. There was no answer like this. It didn't seem like he could fight. If he was to lose like this, the disordered terror would steal his body like it said. It was when he just realized his defeat. Swoosh. From Muyong's bosom, a talisman shined. This is. Muyong took out the talisman. There were 4 letters written on the talisman. Seek life, instant death. Those who seek death shall live. After looking at it, Muyong raised a shudder for a moment. It was the talisman Saint Snow gave to Muyong. Or rather, the gatekeeper of a world tree, Swell, gave it to him instead. Could it have been left to be used at this moment? Those who seek death shall live. Muyong nodded his head. It was better to fight with his life on the line than to give up his body. He had never admitted his defeat. It seemed like he was out of his mind for a moment due to the unknown terror the disordered terror released. The moment he realized, his shoulders became lighter. Fighting fiercely. Wasn't that Muyong's usual way? Chapter 113, Those who seek death shall live, End. TL, Nadu. Editor, Lee Suris. Muyong took a deep breath and calmed himself down. Hiss. And struck with anguish. He wasn't trying to kill the disordered terror. He slit his own wrist to overcome the terror that appeared due to the disordered terror. Blood spattered on his cheek and his mind cleared. His stamina and energy were lost, but he became much more cool-headed. In time, Muyong's eyes started to read the grains of the disordered terror. The grains are like traces. The passing of time branded on everything. It was like a stamp that was imprinted on their souls. Even if you do that, it's nothing more than squirming. Just give in and give up your body. You're in a hurry. Muyong's eyes shined. It had become very clear why the disordered terror made the barrier, showed up inside it, and was after his body. The disordered terror wanted Muyong to give up. It waited for Muyong to destroy himself and give it his body. Because within that overwhelming size, the hidden content inside it was extremely lousy. A worm. Although the exterior is strong, the inside is no different than a bug. While holding his right wrist, he couldn't help but smile. The disordered terror's true form was like a worm. It couldn't trick Muyong's eyes as well. The truth was hidden within the huge shadow. If he hadn't got back to his senses, Muyong would have also been blinded by its outer appearance. The disordered terror didn't speak with words. It let him know by showing that it was mad. Muyong barely avoided it, but his expression was much more relaxed. This place isn't really reality. It's inside your dream. A demigod. An individual stronger than the Demon King. However, Muyong remembered how the disordered terror looked after the defensive tumor disappeared. Wasn't it just curled up and unable to do anything? It wasn't able to absorb the world tree. How can that form be called a demigod? So, what Muyong saw right now was all an illusion that the disordered terror wanted. It hoped to become a true demigod and go wild. It's like you said. However, if you die here, you will truly die. Even if the disordered terror was found out, it still spoke oppressively. Muyong shrugged his shoulder. As it admitted, it wasn't like there was no way for Muyong to win. It isn't like you're the only one that dreams. I will face a dream with a dream. This was a world of an illusion. Even if it was the disordered terror's dream, there was still room to fight. As if it realized what he was thinking, it spoke as if it was ridiculous. Do you think you can win against my wish? My mass that I have built for thousands of years. There is no way for a human, who has lived only a few years, to be able to. An ancient darkness spirit. Like the name, it was a spirit that existed since ancient times. With only one desire of becoming a demigod. I can't remember the last time I had a dream. Dreams were basically imaginations. To Muyong, he lacked this part in being imaginative. It was possible for him to sincerely make plans and act on them, but to draw things in his mind about things he hadn't experienced, it was difficult. It could only be that way. Since Muyong's time had basically stopped since 40 years ago. He lived by doing things he was told to do. He only thought of what was the best action for a given situation. Although he had returned in time, not much time had passed. It meant that it was hard to move the clock again, which had basically stopped 40 years ago. But, he was clearly aware of one picture. An image he believed was his future, although he didn't experience it. Muyong closed his eyes. He slowly lowered anguish to his waist, and in an instant, he stretched his sword out as if it bounced away. I'm the Absolute. He released the light of the Star of Absolute. The red light encroached the surroundings, and in time, it fell on Muyong. Swoosh! The wind blew. The sword energy had been released. A single attack that assembled all the grains. However, it was an absolute blow that was made by the Absolute. The sword energy that stretched out from the sword split space. The energy split the disordered terror's body and broke the barrier. Although it was only once was good enough. A feeling as if all his energy had been lost. The Absolute's sword, the sword energy, was something like that. Myung was able to succeed with one demonstration as he truly put his fighting power within that one blow. Those who seek death shall live? However, Myung was able to capture everything as he truly threw all his strength towards death. Clank! Soon, the barrier started to fall down. The part of the disordered terror's body that was cut off fell down in pieces. Between them, there was a worm that squirmed. Squish! Myung approached it and stepped on it without any hesitation. The worm's body popped and announced the end of the barrier. An endless sound that rang in his mind continued. Brrrr. Myung's body shivered. He had collapsed after spilling out all his strength, but as if it didn't happen, he became conscious again. Afterwards, when Myung slowly opened his eyes, he noticed someone with a black coat. Who is he? A slouched body, and helmet that soared up like a horn. Both sections of his arms were loose and the lich wore a necklace with a gem. Light and dark lines that resembled a haze went around him, and he had a pair of small wings, with a mix of white and black feathers. Myung turned his head. He was still on the mountain. My arm has regenerated. Then, he looked at his body once again. Through the second metamorphosis, his body has fully recovered. The Azura King's left arm laid on the ground all by itself. He felt he was born again. He sought death but was newly birthed. Who are you? I'm your faithful servant. The lich went down on one knee. Then Myung realized that the lich in front of him was Bi Sungmin. As the disordered terror's madness ended, he had returned to his original form. As he just got up, he was hazy, and because he wore a helmet, Myung was unable to recognize him. However, Bi Sungmin had died and the contract of death had activated. Now, he was just an undead. Bi Sungmin had memories of when he was human but had lost all emotions. As he took a closer look, information about him followed. Level 380. Type Arc Lich. Strength 200, Agility 200, Stamina 300. Intelligence 400, Wisdom 400, Magic Resistance 450, Chaos 450. Plus Strength of Great Chaos, Immunity against Light and Darkness. Plus able to use all Necromancer skills, A rank. Plus due to Lineage of Light, Saint skills are usable, B rank. Plus Necklace Talisman, Intelligence and Wisdom plus 80, usable. Plus Coexistence of Light and Darkness. Infinite strengthening potential. An Arc Lich. It was hard to imagine a lich immune to light. It was rare for an undead to have Arc within its name. On top, for it to be Saint. Although it was only a B rank, a Saint was recognized as very high level even among priests. You could say there was one among 10,000. But, he was able to use both Necromancer and Saint skills at once. That necklace is the talisman. Myung motionlessly looked at the necklace Bi Sungmin was wearing. The gem in the middle of the necklace seemed to be the talisman. It emitted bright light, and as it joined the necklace, a strong synergy was produced. Bi Sungmin became a lich on a different level as his intelligence and wisdom increased by 80. For now, I can let him keep it. Myung could use the talisman when the time comes. Instead of leaving it to waste until then, it was better to have Bi Sungmin wear it and be of use. By looking at it, it seems like the necklace was effective only for Bi Sungmin. Take it. Myung passed the Azura King's left arm to him. Bi Sungmin still didn't have arms. Bi Sungmin slowly got up and put on the Azura King's left arm. Soon, tentacles stretched out from the arm and united with Bi Sungmin, as if it was part of his body. Thank you. But, the Lineage of Light should be Bi Suzi's skill, no. There were things he was curious about. The Lineage of Light was the name of the skill Bi Suzi learned from the Sky Library. It seems like it's a characteristic that is transferred by blood relations. That why it's called a lineage. He nodded slightly. Myung never thought that the lineage skill would allow Sungmin to use even Saint skills, but there was nothing bad about it. After recognizing Bi Sungmin's existence, Myung straightened his arm. I've become stronger. Muyong could feel the aftermath of the metamorphosis through his skin. You could say it was just the second metamorphosis, but it was different from a normal second metamorphosis. I didn't think it was time for a second metamorphosis yet. What was most surprising was that his pure stats were quite from what was needed for the second metamorphosis. It seemed like he was forced into the second metamorphosis when he saw the wall of the Absolute. The belt of Aries. Afterwards, Muyong tilted his head after seeing how his belt had changed. Soon, after realizing that it was a present from the Masters of the Darkness, he took a closer look. Name, Belt of Aries. Rank, A+++. Classification, Equipable Type. Endurance, 50,000. Effect, 1 of the 12 zodiac stars. A belt placed on Aries. Asterisk magic resistance plus 40. Asterisk spirit ability plus 40. Asterisk it ignores skills below B rank, excluding some. Asterisk ability to fly. When you collect 3 out of the 12 zodiac stars, all stats plus 30. When you collect 6 out of the 12 zodiac stars, it ignores skills below A rank. When you collect 12 out of the 12 zodiac stars, achievement effect, King of 12 Zodiacs. Ha! He couldn't help but be inwardly surprised. Although he might disregard other things, he couldn't disregard the skill immunity and related options that were added. Let alone, it was a set equipment and even had the potential possibility of being immune to skills below A rank. It is very rare to find equipment with skill immunity. Not to mention skills below B rank. From Muyong's memories, among the existing equipment, the highest immunity was B+. Also, it was used by Wang Chunglin. Muyong's half a level lower than his, but the potential possibility was higher. His heart raced fast. Soon after, Muyong turned on his status viewer. He wanted to check the changes with his own eyes. Achievement effect. Star of Purity, S+, all stats plus 30, the Wall of the Absolute. Stats. Strength 305, 187 plus 118, Agility 242, 143 plus 99. Stamina 276, 136 plus 140, Intelligence 266, 171 plus 95. Wisdom 247, 172 plus 75, Fighting Aura 212, 102 plus 110. Magic Resistance 300, 90 plus 210, Spirit Ability 200, 90 plus 110. A plus was added to the Star of Purity. All stats increased by 10 and through the effects of metamorphosis, his strength, intelligence, and wisdom greatly increased. Since I've completed the second metamorphosis, the pure stats will rise more quickly. He wanted to move at once and train, but he didn't have time to spare. He needed to return to his territory and prepare for the Devil's Long Night. Boing! While that went on, a lump of light flew near Muyong. The lump of light gently went on top of Muyong's head. The Armful's Cradle Spirit. The lump of light whispered its name. However, that was it. It didn't tell him anything else besides that. What is the Armful's Cradle Spirit? It was the existence that was mixed inside me. It was cultivated to keep the disordered terror in check. It isn't fully developed, so no one knows of the specifics. They said they found it by chance at the Temple of Light. A spirit placed inside to keep the disordered terror in check? As no information popped up when he looked at it carefully, it meant that it was an unknown spirit that even the Sky Library had no information of. Since it didn't seem like it would cause any evil, he left it alone. Boing! Boing! The lump of light continuously moved as if it was playing on top of Muyong's head. It's time for me to return. As if he couldn't care less, Muyong turned his body. He quickly ended the current situation and it was now time for him to return. 1 cope. A cope is a long, loose cloak worn by a priest or bishop on ceremonial occasions. Chapter 114, The Devil's Long Night, 1. TL, Te. Editor, Lee Suris. Takan dusted off his sword. The human hunt was over. It had been a good opportunity to check his skills. It was the result of devouring everything to live up to the name of evil spirit predator. If he was stagnant, it wouldn't have ended this way. From what he sees, 30 points out of 100. What? Takan's skeletal frame shook. Before he knew it, he had come to sight C and was closely watching Takan's fight. Then she evaluated his overall score and began grading. Even though he didn't ask for her opinion. He thought she was a fairy with nothing to do, but he couldn't help but be offended by the incredibly bad score. He flew round and round in the sky while saying, "There's no intensity. There's nothing to see. It's boring. Aren't you too self-absorbed? I see there's nothing you can't say. Do you want to die? Try to be half as good as husband." That liveliness. His transcendence that is difficult to express in words. Besides, he's cool. In many ways you're different from him, child. Hi. Takan shivered. He wanted to split that wicked fairy in half with a single stroke if he could, but it wasn't easy. Because this was the fairy that followed Myung around? That also played a part, but there was another reason. I don't know why the fairy king and the demon god's blessings are given to such a fairy. Others could be deceived, but his eyes couldn't be fooled. Evil spirits. In other words, there were some things that were visible only to Takan, who managed many souls. Even Myung would not have noticed. Many of the blessings bestowed on Wei were clearly contrasted with the other fairies. If he messed with her in the wrong way, the result was unknown. All the blessings were equal to a small miracle. It was horrible just thinking about what effects would result from activating that many blessings. But the one he understood the least was the demon god's blessing. Weren't the fairies helping Solomon? He only knew there was such a contract. But, even by taking only that into consideration, it was still strange. So it isn't the 72 demon gods. Maybe there is something similar in the fairy world. After taking a closer look, the result felt a little different from the 72 demon gods. Well, those guys were true evil that couldn't pass down blessings and the like. They were the 72 demon gods that were born and raised in evil. It must have been another entity in the fairy world that placed blessings on Wei. Fairies originally didn't match well with evil, but by seeing how she followed Myung, who was so close to evil, it seemed to have some sort of influence on her. If it was some other fairy, they would be terrified of Myung. Wei. Husband, not there. Wei wiped the side of her mouth while drooling. She seemed to be imagining Myung again. For a stupid fairy like her to be so greatly blessed. One would use the words pearls around a pig's neck in times like these. 1. Takan sighed deeply. Takan. From a place not too far away, Myung approached. Myung and someone else. An arch-lich. Takan instinctively grasped his sword. Not simply because he was an arch-lich. He was powerful. Also, the mysterious energy of the light surrounding the lich aroused Takan's aggression. This lich is not an enemy. From now on, he will be with us. Was he the bastard mixed up with the disordered terror? His name is Bi Sungmin. Myung, let me give you one piece of advice. You can't carelessly believe a lich. Also, this lich is giving off a strange aura. Myung grinned. Although Takan's advice was unexpected, it meant that Bi Sungmin's energy threatened Takan that much. You could say it was a good thing for someone who was usually so thick-skinned about most things to have this much alertness about the lich. Don't worry. The lich is under my control. Did you make it? It's my first time seeing a lich with energy of light that strong. If the light's effect was a little greater, he might have been born as something other than a lich. Something more transcendental. Something else could be born? Takan's words were quite profound. Bi Sungmin's energy was that strong because of the lineage of light and the necklace with the talisman embedded in it. If Bi Suzy, the descendant of the lineage of light, was to be involved, what form would it have taken? Anyway, can't I fight him once? Takan asked while pointing his sword. Besides his doubts, it seemed like he had a great heart to win. Myung shook his head. We have to go back. It seems like it has been cleaned up. These worthless beings are no match for me, Takan said as he sadly put away his sword. At that moment, there was a noise that strongly pierced his ears. Husband! Will he, who had seemed to have been frozen like ice, immediately came flying over. Then she wailed as she pointed towards the top of Myung's head. Is this an affair? What is this wicked bitch? That's Will-hee's place. The spirit of Armful's cradle still didn't have a form yet. It was merely a mass of light that stayed above Myung's head. Seeing that, Will-hee became quite agitated. However, there was no response from Armful's cradle. It was obvious. To Myung, the spirit of Armful's cradle was not dissimilar to a baby. Since it wasn't fully grown, it was poor at expressing emotions. When words didn't work, Will-hee began to use force. She spoke as she poked the Armful's cradle's side. The more she poked, the more the Armful's cradle helplessly shook. If one was to see an abusive sister-in-law, it would look like this. Get lost. You're not moving? Will you leave once you taste bitterness from Will-hee? Stop. Myung was forced to interrupt. Will-hee's wings drooped. Humph. Husband, but... Myung closed his mouth and turned around. He was obviously ignoring her. Realizing that, Will-hee stared at the Armful's cradle's spirit and shrieked, is she? Anyway, Will-hee is the wife. You're a concubine. The lawless, Rain and Beast clans were caught in a state of emergency. They had lost contact with the elites who went to find the talisman. Everything happened at the same time and it was a totally unexpected scenario. The leaders were taken aback. Who the hell was it? They'd immediately dispatched an investigation team, but all that remained were corpses. Decaying corpses and broken undead. And all that could be seen was a skin that seemed to be the remainder of the disordered terror and its reeking tumors. Who is it? Who did this? Veins stood up in the neck of the lawless clan leader, Lawless Jin. He angrily gasped for breath. During the investigation, he confirmed the badge of the Rain and Beast clans. They had also suffered. However, something felt off. They were robbed of the talisman. The only ones who know of it are the Rain and Beast clans. There is nothing strange if those sly foxes were to put on a show. Creak. Blood flowed from his tightly clenched fist. If there was one strange thing, it would be the outsider from Twilight Village they found out about through their investigation. The outsider. Myung or something. He didn't know what sort of person he was. However, he was also suspicious. In order to do such a thing, he would have to rank amongst the top 10 humans. Also, all the huge groups knew of those strong men, their names, descriptions, and movements. Among them, the name Myung didn't exist. Also, there was a high possibility that this Myung was planted by another clan for the sake of confusion. Beast. Rain. Lawless Jin ground out the names of the two clans. What kind of thing was the talisman? It was a sacred power that could even create holy spirits. Its value was beyond description. Even several castles could be bought with it. If the culprit was from one of those two groups, he'd never let it slide. Contact the operatives infiltrating the two clans. Let's take a closer look at their movements. If there is anything odd, report it immediately. It wasn't like there was no way. Lawless Jin had planted operatives in all the clans and guilds long ago. In other words, spies. Other guilds and groups did the same, but when it came to this, no one could compare to him. Yes, sir. A man wearing a white gown nodded his head and immediately left Lawless Jin's room. And Lawless Jin opened his lips slightly. Ataraxia, I have some work for you. Slither. Hundreds of snakes began coming down throughout the room. However, Lawless Jin looked at them emotionlessly as if he was familiar with them already. Soon, the tail of the largest of the snakes could be seen when Lawless Jin said, "Look into the person called Myung. If you can capture him alive, do so. Also." After pausing for a moment, Lawless Jin continued. "I entrust you with looking into the fighting king. Recently he's been accompanied by a girl? As if he plans to raise her as his student, it seems he treasures her quite a lot. You must use whatever means necessary and get the fighting king on our side. Technically, aren't we from the same faction?" Hiss. The snakes responded by hissing simultaneously. Then they disappeared once again. "I'll find out everything. If they're associated, I will get rid of them and take it all back." Lawless Jin was not used to being caught off guard in this way. Lawless Jin was the type of human that caused suffering rather than suffered. And the one at the center of all this. If only he could catch and confront this Myung, he could uncover so much of the truth. Ataraxia was a swift tracker. No matter how those bastards hid, he didn't believe she would fail. They'd escaped Twilight Village and the mountain range 9 days ago. Taken couldn't resist asking Myung, "When are you planning on cutting off the tail following us?" Scrape. Scrape. Myung was cleaning his sword. As they hunted for something to eat, Anguish had become dirty. He removed the dirt and washed the blood off it. Even Taken was dumbfounded by this. For him to use a weapon like Anguish to catch wild boar. He thought Myung was a man with no great love for the sword, but seeing his behavior, it didn't seem like that was necessarily the case. "If you don't get involved, I will. It's quite nerve-wracking." "You still have nerves?" Taken clucked as Myung looked at him unexpectedly. Since there was only bone, there was no way nerves could be left, but there was no need to point that out. "I'm just saying. Bring it back alive." Taken moved immediately after receiving Myung's permission. Soon, with a resounding boom, Taken returned with a person over his shoulder. It was a woman Myung was familiar with. Yang Mei. The woman who had explained the disordered terror in detail. "Why were you following us? PL. Please take me with you." Yang Mei seemed quite desperate. However, Myung merely wrinkled his brow. "I can't think why. Aren't you the star who eats stars?" "Star who eats stars?" Thump. Taken threw Yang Mei to the ground. Yang Mei knelt modestly after straightening her clothes. "I saw your activities. The disordered terror is. I still can't believe it, but I saw something at the end. The red star. The star who eats stars." It seemed she was talking about the star of the Absolute. At the removal of the disordered terror, the star helped in the final moments. Yang Mei saw it and seemed certain that Myung was definitely able to rob other stars using starlight. Yang Mei closed her eyes and spoke as if she was reciting a poem aloud. "If the star-eating star appears, all stars are attracted and fight. Thus, at the end of chaos, the star of the beginning will be born. Once again, the logic of the world would be created. Is it poetry? It's a legend that is passed down in our tribe. I am one of many star keepers, but please take me with you. I will be of help in finding other stars." Yang Mei lifted the edge of her clothing. Then, a large number of star tattoos appeared on her shoulder. "This is the Starkeeper's token. My tribe's mission is to deliver stars and create the star of the beginning. I didn't expect to meet the star-eating star, the one that begins everything, but surely this must be fate." Myung continued to stare at Yang Mei's tattoo. It was odd, but he couldn't take his eyes off of the small picture carved into her shoulder. Hair as white as snow. It was a small carving of the woman with wings of a devil and an angel. "Who is this?" With a little smile, Yang Mei pointed with her hand. "This is my savior. She's as cold as snow and as untraceable as the wind. I kept her alive in a tattoo. It was also my savior that told me to stay at Twilight Village for my role." Snow. It was most definitely snow. The features were only engraved and the face was unknown, but the characteristics were enough. "Who the hell are you?" Muyong's expression hardened. It seemed like Snow was telling him that if he followed the stars he would meet her. One pearls around a pig's neck, Korean term similar to cast pearls before swine. Editor note, to give valuables to those who don't see their worth. Chapter 115, The Devil's Long Night, 2. TL, Nadu. Editor, Lee Suras. The Three Pickaxe Alliance was working towards a massive reorganization. After the dragon died, they had been busy as they started military training and recovering the damaged buildings in the place where its energy dwelled. In reality, after the death of the dark dragon Barca, the signs of dragons died down. The dwarves made it known to the whole world that they were no longer slaves who could be exploited. Their lord, Bartas, looked at the guests that suddenly appeared with a surprised look on his face. "Your horns?" Were Dakibas able to retract their horns? Muyong, who Bartas obviously believed was a Dakibi, horns had disappeared from his head. From Bartas's perspective, it was something that made his eyes widen. Even so, it wasn't enough for Bartas to not recognize Muyong, but it was true that it made him look completely different. This will be troublesome. Muyong inwardly clicked his tongue. If Bartas was to react this way, the reaction of people in the territory was obvious. Inevitably, Muyong, who shook his head, momentarily looked at grains. A world where it became 4 times slower. Muyong felt a bit disappointed as he was able to watch even the movements of the facial muscles. For time reduction, the pure stats are important. He had slight hopes that he would be able to stay in the slower world for a bit longer as he completed his second metamorphosis, but as there was nothing free in the world, it was all dependent on his basic condition. That is, his pure stats. The standard was Muyong's strength, without adding anything to it, but just as it is. It appeared that this occurred as the grain itself was about the essence, the purity. But, through the second metamorphosis, it was going to be easy for him to increase his pure stats to at least 200. It basically meant that time was the problem. As his 2 horns appeared, Bartas's eyes grew bigger. "Ha, for you to have 2 horns. As expected, you are worthy to be the master of the Dakibas." Swoosh. However, the duration was short. After showing for about 10 seconds, Muyong returned to normal. But, the important part was that Bartas recognized him. Muyong coldly spoke. "Keep your promise." He had finished verifying himself. The rest was for Bartas to keep his promise. As a condition when he helped the dwarves be free from the dark dragon Barca, Muyong was planning to borrow their strength. With a friendly relationship, he was planning to reserve strength for him to at least survive the Devil's Long Night. Fortunately, Bartas willingly nodded his head. "If it's a promise, I must keep it. We, dwarves, never forget a favor. I will lend 1,000 dwarves for 3 years. It is what they want as well." 3 years. Muyong couldn't help but be slightly surprised by this incredible offer. At most, he thought it would be around 1 year. Even though this place was a small kingdom for the dwarves, it had to be a tremendous loss for them to share 1,000 dwarves. It was more of a loss since they had just received damage from the dark dragon Barca. Although they were unsure how long it would take for them to recover and strengthen this place, they gladly assigned 1,000 dwarves to him. For Muyong, who had been thinking of alternatives if they didn't keep their promise, it was truly a relief. Soon, a familiar dwarf face came to him with a group. "I'm glad to see you again, Master Kalmu." With the start of their relationship since the underground arena, he had become Muyong's faithful slave after Muyong had avenged for his son. Although he was old, it meant he had many years of experience. His role was to increase his skills at this place while Muyong took care of Bi Sungmin. As Muyong came back, he showed himself to join him. Kalmu kneeled. "Kaham." Bartas cleared his throat. In all honesty, it wouldn't have been a great sight for Kalmua to obey Muyong in front of him, a lord. It was ill-mannered and rude, but he couldn't scold him. Muyong was their hero, a savior. On the other hand, Bartas was a king who continuously made mistakes. He tried to run away and most dwarves saw this. It was okay until then, since Bartas was their one and only king. However, after fighting against the Dark Dragon, the dwarves also gained their own will. Bartas was in a state where his position would become dangerous if he was to bother their hero. Kalmua turned around and looked at the dwarves he brought as he spoke. They are all young and skilled companions. There are even kids I kept my eyes on. They should be of great help. Muyong nodded his head. Kalmua didn't stay here to play around. Nominally, it was to raise his skills, but it seemed like he devoted himself in looking for talented dwarves. 1,000 promising dwarves. It was enough to newly reorganize his entire territory. 3 years is enough. Although they said 3 years, no one knows what would happen after those 3 years. Among the 1,000 dwarves, how many would return? Since Bartas said he would lend the dwarves, it seemed like he was confident that they would return. However, Muyong wasn't the type to easily return things he had earned. It was a continuation of surprises. Yang Mei thought to herself that he was someone that she couldn't keep track of. However, a star keeper was a person who provided guidance. She tried her best to not show her emotion. The Three Pickaxe Alliance is a top-secret alliance of the dwarves. Is the Star-Eating Star the savior of these dwarves? But still, she couldn't just remove her inner feelings. Yang Mei was a woman who knew how to use information in her own way. This was a secretive place that was only known to those who knew of the Three Pickaxe Alliance. She was certain they existed, but no one else knew the truth about the existence of the Three Pickaxe Alliance. At most, only catching glimpses of their shadows. But, she had confirmed the truth. On top of that, it seemed Muyong was their savior and hero. It was odd why he went to the demon god's territory, but her doubts about him were removed. The dwarves' eyes were full of trust as they looked at Muyong. But what is an Everything that was said by the Lord of Dwarves, Bartas, was surprising, but she couldn't understand the title Muyong was called by. A ruler of the Dakibus. In reality, all Yang Mei knew about Muyong was that he was the Star-Eating Star, and nothing else. However, it didn't take long for her to understand the meaning of the word a stretch of land. A huge territory that existed within the demon god's territory. Yang Mei felt a shiver after seeing a number far greater than 10,000 Dakibus gathered at that place. It was a place where Dakibus and humans coexisted, and there was even a fire tar. If you even add the small number of other species, there was no end. On top, the dwarves had joined. It truly was an odd combination of groups, but they were mixed and blended together. This all was the strength of the Star-Eating Star. His potential. It was the first time she had seen something like this. There were many times where monsters followed humans, but if that number goes beyond 10,000, the story changes. This was the start, and if he could acquire a vaster area, his power would be just as good as other groups. Gulp. Yang Mei wiped her brow. Sweat ran down like rain. The Star-Eating Star. The more she knew about him, his achievements approached her more sincerely. A star of beginning was born when all the stars were eaten. And so, within a new law, the world will be restructured. Perhaps she might be facing the waking phase of the legend to be. Greetings, Lord. Greetings, Baltan and Sahun kneeled at the same time. Muyong was worried about the fact that they might not recognize him, but it was just utter groundless. Baltan was an undead and Sahun recognized instinctively. Also, Baltan, as the guardian of the territory, and Sahun, as the director of Dakibus, they each had different roles. However, compared to the past, there was a big difference in the tension in the air. Their body position and the powers that could be felt from them became much keener. They had brushed up on their skills as they looked forward to the day they were to fight against each other. It was obvious that they would become a bigger problem if Myung was to leave them alone. Hold a festival. Like I've promised, we will start arranging ranks. Myung also didn't plan on standing by. Before the devil's long night started, he needed to tie up loose ends. If they didn't prepare as one, the territory would be destroyed from the inside. He wasn't simply trying to endure it. He also had Devil Hunt in mind. To open the book, Call of the Devil, a high-ranked devil is needed. The last reward of the underground arena. It was an item that a devil tried many times to earn. He was unsure as to why the devil wanted it, but he would know of the reason if he was to capture a high-ranked devil and open it. After hearing Myung's statement, Baltan bowed his head more deeply. Sehun grinned and showed respect. A festival had started. They danced and sang together as they drank. Although it was considered a festival, there wasn't much that was different. Myung sat on the throne they had made and watched them. An arena that was created last minute by borrowing the help of the dwarves. Although it was just a fenced space with marble flooring, the formality wasn't that big of a deal. For a day, as a mean for turning over a new leaf, everyone had fun. The dwarves were luckily able to mingle with the people. And on the second day, it is a place for each of you to show your skills to distinguish the strongest. Fight and win. I will promise that you will be rewarded a position and a reward right for you. The territory was getting bigger. Myung couldn't always be the one to rule over the land. He needed to give people positions that were right for them and handle matters transparently. However, most species left out weaklings. It was sad that fighting power was the only way to simply compare their skills, but that was also the reality of the underworld. After Myung's short announcement, everyone's attitude changed. In total, about 2,000 people signed up to participate in this fight known as a playoff. Dakibus, humans, and other different species were all mixed in. They each held their own weapon and stood with their blade facing up. The fun and laughter from yesterday had disappeared. As if it never happened, the mood was as if they were about to go into battle. Myung, they have looked forward for you to come back. Every day was survival and was time they used to brush up on their skills. And as an observer, Augur participated. His expression showed how he was also quite interested. As he stood beside Myung, he started small talk with Myung. Is that so? As Myung answered without much thought, Augur clicked his tongue. You are a king to them. Not simply a lord. Do you not understand the difference? Augur said something very significant. A giant-like figure, the vice-chieftain of the Fire Tars. He was truly a strange Fire Tar but was also one of Myung's closest people. At least, he wasn't the type to lie. He was truly asking Myung. The difference between a lord and a king, he says. It was the same how they ruled over their lands. Kings took care of a few lords to cultivate a much wider land. The numbers were different and their positions were different. They even made rules and started broad events. But, strictly speaking, this also wasn't greatly different from what lords had to do. Myung was unsure what other differences there were besides this. From the beginning, Myung didn't have much experience leading others. It was an obvious thing. Unless it was Wang Chunglin, Myung always moved alone. Managed everything by himself. It was very new for him to lead others and to rule over them. He just acted on the standards of what he had heard and saw over someone else's shoulder. Watch. They will fight with their life on the line. Not just Baltan and Sehun but new talents will appear. A group is maintained like this. Augur rubbed his chin. He had the expression of a child with a fun toy in front of him. Myung was still puzzled as he watched the fight. All he wanted to do was awaken the atmosphere and make them unite as one. But, there was something that even he was unaware of. Chapter 116, The Devil's Long Night, 3. TL, Te. Editor, Lee Suras. It was the emergence of new talent. Indeed. Honestly, Myung didn't have high hopes. He firmly believed that apart from the undead he had created, those in his territory were just an assortment of people. The speed of their growth was slow compared to Muyoung's, and if this continued, he felt certain that they wouldn't be a big help. However, he brought many citizens in order to increase his lord's skill ranking and to rule over them a bit easier. Anguish's patron, Gremory, the demon king of the 27th Legion. In order to get a glimpse of the two secrets, he needed to do so. The path for Muyoung to become a demon king himself. In order to become a powerful thorn, he needed to expand his territory. That was all. As a matter of fact, it wasn't an exaggeration that Muyoung had no hope in them. However, I am Arund. Lord. I will show you my skills. I am Ger1. My lord. I will surprise you. Before fighting, everyone greeted Muyoung. Their eyes were filled with vigor. In addition to the 500 Dakibas and 20 humans, 300 others who had lived as slaves in the arena volunteered. A total of about 800 participants that were overflowing with fighting spirit. Did they enjoy fighting? However, that didn't seem right. Maybe not for the Dakibas, but the majority of the slaves were weak. They gave their will to the dogs. However, that image was completely different now. The will to fight. Their fighting spirit shone in their eyes. They were merely hoping that Muyoung would look at them. Do they want compensation or status? Surely they had something to gain from fighting. Since Muyoung had promised, they would be treated well for getting good results. Expanding his territory, increasing the population. In order to deal with them effectively, leaders were needed. However, that didn't seem to be the only thing. I suppose if I watch I'll know. It may have been because of Augur's words, but in any case, he wanted to watch them more. Even though he wasn't knowledgeable, he was able to understand that their lord, Muyoung, didn't simply put them together. He wasn't a good guy and he was far from having a kind or caring personality. However, there was one thing. There was one thing that was imprinted in everyone. His movements swept through everything. He was like a typhoon. In addition, there was something unusual about those gathered around him. Muyoung just moved, but they all naturally followed him. Why was that? Because he is a leader. That was it. He was gifted with the fate of a great leader. Great leaders were born with the power to rule. And he didn't think this would end at just this simple territory. Even if he didn't wish for it, he would soon be crowned as king. Although the situation ended up this way, it wasn't easy for other species to live together in harmony. No one was willing and it was considered taboo. This was because the lifestyles and behavior of the tribes were not all the same. However, Muyoung accomplished it. His overwhelming charisma made it possible. If he really became king, they might experience a world that they had never seen before. His heart raced. His rule was something that the Dakibas wished for, and the 2,000 arena slaves held no hostility towards his rule. In this situation, which was unseen and unheard of, the humans were in a state of half-doubt. However, they had to fight and prove themselves to survive. It was a situation where there was no other way but to fight to avoid being swept away in the fierce wave and endure the struggle. My sword is exclusively for the sake of the king. Of course, for Bolton the territory guardian, Muyoung was already the king. And in order to receive the qualification as the king's knight, he had to win at any cost. Hey! Sahun stifled a growing smile. An ice Dakibi with an evolved Dakibi's form, a Duoxini. Although he managed almost 20,000 Dakibas, he still participated in this match. This was because he had to finish things with Bolton. However, that aside, he couldn't hold himself back because his body itched to do this. Ah, it's fun. It's really fun. His mouth itched. If he could, he wanted to laugh out loud. Muyoung. Their had gotten so much stronger after going outside for a while. Sahun the Duoxini was able to tell. Now he couldn't be a match for him. There's no way of knowing how much stronger he will get. His steep growth rate was not normal. But if he was then, of course, he should be so. He must lead the goblins by accomplishing what could not be done by anyone and by showing them. That was why he was and their master. However, what of the dwarves? Dwarves were famous for being a stubborn race. They didn't really follow others. They didn't trust or give their affection easily. However, he came leading hundreds of them. The image of in their eyes dared them to think of a hero. For them to worship and naturally follow him was indeed due to Um's presence. Dear are you trying to become king? I will give my life to help you. If became a king, this territory would become a kingdom. However, was greedy and trying to put together all the species. In order to always aid in the front lines, he needed to gather the scattered Dakibas and show their strength. Has proved his qualifications. Now it's our turn. Sahun cried out. Ahum! 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 The 500 Dakibas that were participating in the tournament shouted in excitement. They also knew Sahun's sincerity. They'd become aware of what he saw and felt. That they couldn't lose. They'd risk their lives for this fight. It was intense. No, calling it intense was not enough. The feeling of meeting a lifelong enemy. Also, the shape of that fight somehow resembled Muyong. Isn't this fun? It hasn't been all that long but already they follow you. Muyong was silent. Honestly, he still didn't understand. In the end, what they wanted to resemble was Muyong himself. There really wasn't much shown by him. The times when he was absent were more often. Spending a lot of time together isn't everything. All they needed was just a little hope. Are you saying I gave them hope? Although this place is on the outskirts, strictly speaking, it's a place where the demon gods rule. The Dakibas and the other species are bound to feel uneasy every day. The fire tars too. The fire tars were top predators. Were they afraid of the demons and devils too? Augur nodded affirmatively. It will soon become the onset of the devil's long night. In those days, even the fire tars act carefully. If even we are like that, how do you think it would be for the weaker ones? So, you're saying I'm hope. Exactly. You're changing daily. Just by looking at what you show, they can be comforted and have hope. I don't really understand. He was getting stronger, but others saw that and had hope. In another word, vicarious satisfaction. Well, Muyong was growing at an unbelievable pace. Even when he thought of the past, there was no one who grew like he did. But to see that and have hope? Was it not a greater pleasure to cultivate one's own strength and get what one wanted? Muyong couldn't understand their mentality. But somehow it was obvious. The assassin Muyong, who was created to just follow orders from Wang Chunglin, was never satisfied by just looking at someone. Even when he just returned, he wanted to strengthen himself and didn't think of anyone else. On the other hand, they were following Muyong's example. If their master, Lord Muyong, got stronger quickly, they hoped that they too would be able to get stronger. It was only a tiny spark, but in this place, even that spark was hard to find. Just by Muyong's existence, it lit a fire. Muyong had no idea what an amazing thing that was. And this made Augur smile and think, now I too will have a hard time with my opponent. The simple feeling of the atmosphere changed. He didn't know what had happened in a little over 100 days, but he dared say the difference was like heaven and earth. If time continued to flow in this way, he could not even imagine. The unknown was terrifying, but sometimes it inspired motivation. All this while, I've been careless with my training. I too should begin moving. Since it had even influenced Augur, there was nothing more to say. New talent. As a matter of fact, there were appearances of those with potential. Muyong didn't pay much attention, but they were the ones that were buried in opposition. Through this opportunity, they spread their existence. Arund was one of these. A young dark elf. He was a male that had been defeated in the arena and turned into a slave. He'd been living in confinement in the arena for a good 5 years. Of course, he had no will, and in a spirit of defeatism had thought of himself as a slave. The rank at that place was determined from the time of entry. In reality, everyone was afraid of the challenges. They'd been satisfied with the place they were staying in and refused to move to the next level. How was he different from a pig inside a cage? I'm trash that isn't even a pig. At that moment, a Dakibi appeared. At first, nobody noticed the Dakibi. His fights were always intense, yet he never fell. However, Arand had been watching. From the beginning to the end. The actions of the Dakibi that oddly drew his attention fascinated Arand. The Dakibi moved along. Without hesitation, he had no worries as he challenged. He gave the impression that he was just doing what he was supposed to. 5th floor, 4th floor, 3rd floor. The more he advanced, the more his fame rose. At first, they didn't know who he was, but as time passed, there was no one that didn't know the Dakibi's name. Mweong! 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 Everyone shouted. They were enthusiastic about the appearance of a Dakibi fighting. In other words, he had become a celebrity. Every time he fought, he gained strength and won. Arand closely watched him from the beginning. He was truly an aloof warrior that didn't suit this hog pen. Arand cheered. That night, for the first time in over 5 years, he cheered. He even shed tears. He didn't know why. It was just that the Dakibi's victory moved Arand. Ah! That was it. To Arand, the Dakibi was an idol. And now? That idol was before his eyes. In a place where it seemed he could touch him if he only reached out. It can't be. Sahan. Unbelievable. The Dakibis were astounded. Sahan. The one responsible for 20,000 Dakibis had fallen. The great warrior, the victor of countless battlefields, had fallen to the floor, spewing blood. Then, Arand recovered 2 sacks of daggers he freely moved. Arand had not sustained even one injury. He had perfectly dominated Sahan. When he was a slave at the arena, it was something he could not even think of doing. But as flowers blossomed, Arand changed as he left the arena. He'd gotten stronger. And he sent Mweong a provocative look. My lord. If I win, can I ask you one favor? Arand was no longer a pig in a pen. He wasn't trash. What is it? Mweong asked. And Arand answered. Please fight me. Now Arand was a warrior. A blood-hungry warrior. At that moment, Mweong's lips lifted. He now understood Augur's words. Chapter 117, The Devil's Long Night, 4. TL, Nadu. Editor, Lee Suras. He was disregarding them. He had no expectations about their strength. He wanted to use the dwarves' powers to prepare for the long devil's night. However, as the matchups, the fights, continued, Mweong realized that his thoughts were wrong. Seeds were sown. Just expanding the territory and becoming a demon king wasn't all. There were seeds. Seeds he didn't know what they would turn into. Mweong sowed those seeds, and now he needed to cultivate and harvest them. Interesting. Would a farmer feel this way? It wasn't expected at all. That was why he was looking forward to it more. I don't know how to fight half-heartedly. If I may be so bold, please fight with me so that there isn't one bit of regret. Arand lowered his head slightly. It was a motion that allowed Mweong to feel a unique edge of the dark elf. However, the dagger hidden within it was really something. It was far from vigor a mere slave could express. Were my perceptions really wrong? They were living creatures. Living creatures are able to bear potential anytime. Even more, they were the seeds that grew as they watched Mweong. They couldn't be puppets. Mweong turned his head. Augur was looking at him. He spoke with his eyes. For him to enjoy the festival. I allow it. Muyeong accepted. Swoosh. At the same time, he took out anguish. The 20,000 people that filled the audience watched Muyeong. If you want to fight me, win. I will only acknowledge the winner. Muyeong was the lord who ruled over this place. If he just accepted any challenge, his rank would be reduced. Only the one who had won all the fights could gain that qualification. I like those who fight. All the past heroes were like that. They broke through all different kinds of harsh conditions to be called a hero. And from the bottom of his heart, he yearned for those heroes. If heroes weren't born but were created, he wanted to see proof. Until now, Muyeong didn't give them any proper attention. He believed he needed to move alone and do everything by himself. Even now, his thoughts didn't greatly change, but what if they were also Muyeong's own strength? He was planning to find out if they could be of use to him or not. He didn't care if it was Arand or someone else. But, Muyeong was going to acknowledge the last one standing. That one would be of leadership material who would provide him strength. Muyeong would greet them into his army, formed from both living and undead. This way Muyeong could be in the center of everything, among the dead and the living. Don't forget your word. Arand's body shivered imperceptibly. Arand was excited. Muyeong was his idol and his goal. At the place where he was downgrading himself as trash and thought he was a pig in a cage, Muyeong was the only one who shined. He dreamed while he watched Muyeong fight in the arena. That he wanted to fight in the same place as him. Never, forget it. Acknowledgement. That was all. It was a funny thing. But it still felt good. On the other hand, that was enough. Arand turned his body. The arena was filled with silence. However, at this moment, his attitude towards the simple fight changed. It altered. This was a battlefield. A place where they cut bones and chewed on skin. A holy battle? A fight that produced glory as it followed the law? There was nothing of the sort. Winning was everything. Muyeong didn't mention any condition besides it. Win. Survive until the end. I'm no longer a slave inside a cage. Arand lived for this day. He pledged that he would live for victories and not for losses. Plump. Muyeong sat on his seat. Continue. Their master spoke. Bolton, the guardian of a territory. Originally, it was Sahun and his fight, but the opponent changed. Arand had risen to become a new match. We weren't original citizens of this land. An old man started to talk. In silence, about 20 people gathered. They all lost. Now just one, only Bolton was left. If it's now, it wouldn't be impossible to escape the demon god's territory. But I'm scared. The old man was a muscular warrior, but his appearance seemed very intimidated. It wasn't due to his loss. He was afraid of leaving the demon god's territory. Due to Heidegger, we were all kidnapped. It was Muyeong who ended Heidegger's tyranny. He had accepted them as his citizens. The violence in the past had also disappeared. And quite some time had passed since then. We grew stronger, and it shouldn't be hard to escape the demon god's territory if we decide to. To escape the demon god's territory, they could return to the crowd of people. However, was that all? I'll be honest. I am afraid of people, of humans. A deep regret was within the old man's words. All of you probably think the same as me. Others nodded as the old man spoke. They were normally weaklings. Ones that wouldn't be missed were kidnapped by Heidegger, with no one to save them. These people who were gathered here at this place were the ones who were thoroughly neglected by modern society. Muyeong might not be aware or might not have put any thoughts into it, but the sorrows of a weakling were beyond one's imagination. What would have been the reason for them to naturally accept Heidegger's tyranny? It was because it was no different compared to when they were within the crowd of people from the beginning. Heidegger intelligently kidnapped those who he believed were unneeded. For the first time, we realized each other's importance by coming to this place. We learned what it was to live by helping each other. After coming to the underworld, their existing knowledge became useless. A zone of the strong. A structure where only the strong could eat up everything. The weak would only crawl on the ground. The violence of the strong was no different than the tyranny of Heidegger. They had to live each day by studying other people's faces. They had to go through a narrow path, making small strides to even make ends meet. Don't they just need to get stronger? We weren't even given a chance to get stronger. The vested interests that were developed for decades. They used their fixed resources only for themselves. Occasionally, they chose those fine children who seemed to have potential to become a fine man and place them under their command. The rest were abandoned. Small chances weren't even given easily. The weak competed against each other to go through a place that was thinner than a needle's eye. A hell's path was created to earn even a crumb that was dropped from the strong. However, this place was different. At least in this place where Myung ruled, there were opportunities. What they thought at that moment was the dungeon. The dungeon was a place that flowed with honey. A path where they could become strong, fast and easily. Myung didn't place any restrictions for them to enter that place. They were able to earn rewards by finishing the dungeon by combining their strength. After coming to this place, they had realized that they could survive if they combined their strength after a long time. For them to not chip each other away and gnaw each other to death. They could build their own house and have their own land. In the great city, even that was impossible without authorization. Although it wasn't safe, there were numerous groups in this place. They were able to receive at least minimum safety. Will you return? The old man talked. Would you return and give up this opportunity? I don't want to. The old man answered alone. It was better to die than return. Rather than return to that filthy cesspool, he was willing to die fighting at this place. I also don't want to. I'm sick and tired of it. I want to stop crying by holding on to a rotten rope. But could we remain at this place? Everyone was skeptical about it. Numerous Dakibus and other species. There were at most a dozen humans. They were behind in number. Although Myung remained neutral, it was impossible to know when he would change his mind. The old man clenched his fist. That's why we need to win. Bolton, you are our hope. If you win, we would be able to gather much more weak people. If there was a small hope among the weak, we could let them know that they could infinitely get stronger. If Myung's plan was to really encompass everyone. The old man dreamt of a far future. A dream where those weak who were condemned like himself gathered and developed their strength. It was the last bet he placed his life on. At the same time, everyone's attention focused on Bolton. Bolton, the guardian of the territory. People thought he had changed from before. It wasn't normal for him to suddenly become stronger and become a guardian. But, nevertheless, Bolton was the only one who stood by their side. Since the fact that Bolton accepted Myung's deal and became an undead was solely to protect Irene and them. The old man lowered his head further. See you soon. Swoosh. Bolton took out his sword. His white armor shined more than usual. Plod. He moved towards the battlefield. The finals had come. He needed to win against his last opponent, Arund. Please. Win for us. For recognition. For hope. Everyone spoke of their small wish. As Bolton walked towards the battlefield, his footsteps were immeasurably heavy. A dark horse, Arund. The guardian of the territory, Bolton. Their final round strongly focused everyone's attention. Myung wasn't an exception. They all have their own goals. They all moved with their own ideas. And you are the one who rules over their goals and ideas. Don't think lightly. Never think lightly of that weight. Augur was speaking of it. It seemed likely for him to secretly know how Myung thought of them. Myung's shoulders became heavier. However, this weight was enough for Myung to fully endure. Augur scratched his cheek. I watched them closely. How they grew stronger each day. But, honestly, I'm not sure. Even if they had goals, I'm not sure what made them change that rapidly. However, even Augur didn't know everything. He wasn't a wise man but just an unusual fire tar. Myung thought he knew a bit about this part. It's the most basic of emotions. Most basic. Desire. Achieving goals and desire were subtly different. Even more, hidden desire had spurted. It was the same for Myung. The 40 years of suppressed desire had spurted and he earned the driving force to continuously get stronger. Augur made a surprised face. Desire, desire you say. Will you be able to control that desire? Desire shouldn't be controlled. Then. It's about spurting, colliding, and raging. In other words, you are saying you are going to release it since it's bothersome to control. Kahaha. Augur laughed out loud. He felt like he got punched hard. It was so. Myung currently set his own rules and principles. That he was going to leave them be if they were to run wild as they break from their mold. That he was going to measure which desire was bigger between his and theirs. This also was another unpredicted fight. Show me your desires. A strength that spurted and raged would produce a strong strength in the end. If he was after the Demon King's position, shouldn't he at least endure this with a smile? A Demon King was also a king. Even if he had no experience, he couldn't just postpone it. Even Myung acknowledged that his thoughts had been too small. He was disregarding the strength of a group. He just belittled the strength of mankind. If there were no heroes, he just needed to create them. He realized that simple logic. Wham! Just in time, the fight for desire between Baltan, the guardian of the territory and the dark horse, Arand had started. A thick sandblast scattered like falling starlight. Chapter 118, The Devil's Long Night, End. TL, Nadu. Editor, Lee Suras. Baltan and Arand's fight didn't seem like it was going to end easily. They both showed ideal development beyond what Myung had expected and he was now seeing the results with his own two eyes. Amazing! Baltan was an undead and Arand was a dark elf. They were both beings that were far from human but their growth speed was monstrous. He thought only humans had infinite potential due to Solomon. However, this wasn't true. Other species also had the same, perhaps even more, driving force. Clong. Arand's attacks were swift and sharp. Baltan had sturdiness as his weapon. Currently, Baltan seemed to have the upper hand. It was a common belief for it to be difficult for lightness to win against heaviness. However, the expectation was once again knocked down. Hutush! The great sword flew up high in the air. And in time, was pierced onto the ground like a sealed sword. I won. Arand made a smile. Although his body was cut and bruised, he didn't hide his joy at his victory. He looked at his two hands that pierced through Baltan. A warrior with no weapon couldn't be an opponent against Arand. Arand's victory wasn't expected from anyone. The audience became silent. Not a Dakibi or a human but a dark elf. It was a result that not one person welcomed but Arand didn't care. Thud. As if he wanted Myung to quickly keep his promise, Arand straightened up in front of Myung before he kneeled one knee. Certainly, Baltan was superior. Just that Arand's ability to see his opponent's openings was beyond what I imagined. Baltan, who was weaker than Sahun, had achieved surprising development that surpassed Sahun in no time. Just by this, it was a complete surprise, but a figure who he had no thought of had appeared. In a lord's point of view, this was absolutely not a bad situation. And rather, it might have been better for Arand to win instead of Baltan. Arand was the representative of the slaves of the arena and they were looked down on quite a bit from both the humans and Dakibas of the entire territory. Through this event, somewhat of a balance would be made. To the winner Arand, I will give him the position of Banneret Knight. He can perform duties of a commander and has the authority to lead up to 50 people. While I'm away, he will perform as Lord Deputy with Bolton. After he finished speaking, he looked at Aaron's eyes. As if he didn't have any interest in that sort of position. As if they were burning, Aaron's eyes glared. Myung inwardly thought it was fun. As Augur said, would he be able to enjoy the festival? Heal Aaron. As final entertainment, I will allow you to face me and my sword. Swoosh! Anguish cried in excitement. Bi Sungmin went up and cured Aaron's injuries. Although Bi Sungmin was a lich, he also had the ability to use saint skills. Saints were rare, to where there was only one saint among 10,000 priests. Saints were valuable talents that even in the holy city Malalan, there were only a few dozen saints. Truly, saints only lived in Malalan. It was practically impossible to see them besides a specific period when the saints made their rounds. And so, having a saint meant that the group didn't yield against any guild or otherwise, and had an advantage. Beam. Light surged all over Aaron's body. With an incredible speed of recovery, the wounds were completely healed. Skills or techniques weren't needed. Just showering holy power was enough. Strut. Myung slowly walked up. Aaron got up as he made a dignified smile on his face. No words were needed. He has no plans on losing. Myung chuckled. Aaron had no intention of losing the fight against Myung. Classical eyes of a warrior. Myung felt his blood pumping in a long time. Myung never did anything roughly. Even when he tried to catch a rabbit, Myung was the type to try his best. Even more, Aaron was a warrior. It was discourteous for him to fight by restricting himself. And it was necessary to surely teach him who was at the bottom and the top. Overwhelming. That was needed. Kaya. A blazing dragon went around and around Myung's entire body. The audience who saw this were astonished. It wasn't made up of a simple form. Although it was weak, there was truly a dragon fear effect. They could feel the soul of the dragon through their skin. This strength didn't exist before he left the territory. Did even conquer a dragon? Sehun's eyes widened as much they could. His entire body shivered as he was deeply moved. Only a few months. It was clear that he had dominated a dragon and had its soul in his hand. Augur was also surprised. Dragons were much higher-ranking species compared to fire tars. It might have been possible if the opponent was a chieftain of the fire tars. He never thought Myung would even gain that level of strength. It seemed like only yesterday when he cured the plum tree. Augur inwardly let out a sigh of relief. At this speed, it was certain he would soon surpass the chieftain. If at that time, they mistreated Myung, it was unknown how far the aftermath would have been. Even if he did solve the chronic problem about the plum tree, the stubborn elders were hesitant to give Myung a reward because he was a Dakibi. Even more, they certainly would have had thoughts of removing him by finding some fault in him. Imagining a Myung who survives, develops his strength, and one day points a sword at him, made his fiery spine chill. It would become a matter of the greatest regret. He would have nothing to say if he annihilates everyone because they returned a kindness with ingratitude. However, luckily, Augur did everything he could to reward his efforts. He used all kinds of precious herbs from Myung to go into metamorphosis. A dragon's strength, it's amazing. Haa. Aaron let out a strange sound. It gave him chills. All Myung did was show him his strength, but he didn't feel like he was going to win. If you don't want to disappoint me, you will need to try even harder. Myung spoke indifferently. If what Aaron had shown so far was all he had, he would have been disappointed. Swoosh! Tang! Afterwards, Aaron came right in front of him after leaving an afterimage. He moved his daggers freely and approached to pressure Myung. Clang! Crash! Aaron was able to use powers of thunder and lightning. He was truly as fast as lightning. The dragon's strength that allowed him to automatically attack and block wasn't able to keep up with his speed. Even so, Aaron's expression was gradually getting impatient. None of my attacks are working. He thought he would at least be a worthy opponent. Although he saw the dragon's strength, he didn't believe he would greatly fall behind. In reality, since he had subdued Sahun and Baltan who were under Muyong, his level of confidence was so high that it could pierce through the sky. However, after fighting him first-hand, he was able to understand Muyong's greatness. Muyong didn't move a step from his original position. On the other hand, Aran felt like he was going to get beaten if he was to reduce his speed even a bit, and so he couldn't help but to restlessly move. This also didn't last long. Muyong raised anguish. Then, very slowly stretched out his sword. A slow sword. Compared to Aran's lightning speed, it was too slow. It seemed like a piece of cake to avoid it. However, was it because it was out of the recognition range? At some point, anguish broke Aran's dagger, pierced through his chest, and crushed his bones. Pua! And with the retraction of anguish, blood gushed out from Aran's chest at the same time. Just one strike of a sword. However, it was a method he couldn't understand at all. Ow! It's my best sword. Endlessly think about it and fight fiercely. If there was something you learned, you will become much stronger than now. Muyong turned his body. He didn't use acceleration. He gathered all the enlightenment he learned so far and expressed it in a single strike of a sword. This was Muyong's own way of acknowledgement to the winner, Arand. They respect their lord. As long as a strong lord exists, they will not have a different heart. The level of harmony is B. A decent level of harmony has been made with all the species. The level of development is A. They have a strong desire to become stronger. If you provide them with a condition, they would grow faster than anyone else. The level of satisfaction is B. There are a lot of problems with cleanliness and residence. There is a need to fix the territory overall. The moment the festival ended, Muyong implemented actions to strengthen the overall territory. By combining the 1,000 dwarves and all the territory's manpower, they built walls and hard buildings. On top, by using about 1,000 lord points, Muyong made a small temple. Normally, you needed 2,000 lord points to build a temple, but you could add the general effects of a temple with just 1,000 points. There is nothing bad about having a temple for the Devil's Long Night. The temple Muyong built was a place where the god of Dakibus, Azura, was served. Although its size was small, Azura was in existence who was concerned with Muyong and influenced him. If anything, it would be beneficial and not harmful. As expected, as he built the temple, additional effects existed. The temple was truly worth the price. As Azura's vassal changed to Azura's spokesperson, its rank also increased. It seemed enough to prepare for the devils. As the other species quickly developed and gained strength to resist, it created a situation where it would be worth his while to fight most devils. On top of that, there was a chance for Azura's blessing to continuously be added. If that happened, he would need to increase the number of temples, but this also would be solved at the same time as the Devil's Long Night begins. Lord has built a temple for whom? Aum. Ahom. Ah. The moment the temple was built, the Dakiabas cheered. They sang and danced as they trembled. They were able to serve both and Hum at one place. Also, there was another extra effect. I have heard the sound of Hum's voice. Please accept us, the Earth Dakiabas. Are you the Hum told us to follow you. After the temple was built, Dakibas from all around swarmed in. The numbers weren't that many, but it seemed like the effects of the temple spread quite far. Most came by saying that they had come to this place by hearing the voice of Hum. Like the time when they gathered for the ceremony, it seemed like there was some sort of a special signal. Could being on a roll be more of a fitting phrase than now? Thanks to this, they could accelerate the development of the territory. All other species quickly developed and became stronger day by day. And as more time passed, additional information popped up. Chapter 119, The Duke, Bastro, 1. TL, Te. Editor, Lee Suris. The Devil's Long Night. A period when the moon turned red and souls cried. During this time, the devils were especially vulnerable. No one knew as to why. It occurred approximately once every 5 years and lasted for 3 months, during which numerous devils roamed about. Apart from those with a rank of Demon King and above, all devils did this. The devils aren't perfect. It was the conclusion humanity formed after fighting with the devils for decades. The reason why devils weren't very active outside of the demon god's territory was also thought to be connected to this devil's long night. It was because no matter how much they went berserk, they didn't tend to leave this territory. Of course, there were times when a devil with the rank of duke or higher would occasionally break free of the territory leading a large army to attack humans, but generally that was a rarity. Even though it was only once every 5 years, the fact that they had periods like this was a sign that the devil itself was an incomplete creature. However, it was also humans who couldn't do anything about those incomplete beings. I can't say that the monsters are also unaffected. Myung looked up at the sky. A red moon. The full moon lit up the ground. While looking up at the moon, even Myung had a strange feeling. The monsters would definitely face changes, however, different monsters would have different changes. Nevertheless, if it was here, thanks to the psychological effect of Azura's small temple, they were able to maintain some calmness. I did everything I could. He built up a wall. It was designed not to shake against all but the strongest magic. He created siege weapons and directed training. The population, which had begun with 20,000 people, had increased to 30,000. This was also due to Azura's temple being built, which caused Dakibas from many places to flood in. And so, Myung did everything he could. He didn't know how long they could hold out against the devil's attack, but it was definitely not going to collapse easily. Arund, I'll give you my first order. At the top of the castle, the Lord's room. At the softly spoken words there was a response from the other side of the door. What is it? TCHK. Arund straightened up. Arund, who had become a bannered knight, still wanted to defeat Myung, but since their duel he loyally followed Myung more than ever. It seemed the effect of seeing the slow sword once worked properly. Gather those with agile bodies and start doing reconnaissance of the surroundings. I will follow your command. Also, it was an important duty. There was no way Arund couldn't have known about it. However, he continued to speak as if there was something else he wanted more. When this task has been completed, could you show me that sword again? Myung gave a small smile. Arund. He was truly an interesting fellow, wasn't he? Even though he was on the other side of the door, he could naturally feel his fighting spirit. It felt like he wasn't following him because he was the Lord, but because he wanted to win against him. If there is only one, it should be okay. Arund was quickly getting stronger at a pace that even Myung found surprising. Even more so, he was an aspirant who always dreamed of fighting with Myung whenever he had a chance. There seemed to be no harm in having someone like this next to him, as it could help him stay alert at all times. His ambition could be the greatest enemy of complacency. It's not a sword you can see with just those skills. Ah! Of course it would be like that. Then, I will ask you after I gain more merits. It wasn't like Arund had no sense of shame. Instead, he was going to build up more merits so Myung would not be able to refuse. Myung acquiesced to his obvious intentions. Finally Arund began to move from the door. I don't know what kind of devils will appear. I can't move from this place. This is the biggest problem. In enduring the devil's long night, Myung found the most important thing was reconnaissance. If he could understand them ahead of time, it was possible to establish countermeasures. The possibility of stopping it that way was higher than through helplessness. However, Myung himself was at a level where he could win against most devils. But on the contrary, they would need to know that they could be hunted by me. He had no intention of becoming prey. Myung was a hunter. More skilled than anyone. He adjusted anguish at his waist and looked up at the red moon. Fighting spirit surged through him and he was filled with the desire to fight right away. Was it because he was Or was there another reason? His heart wouldn't settle down easily. Ta-tap. Ta-tap. A large man reminiscent of a death god sat on a throne made of unicorn horns, drumming his fingers against his seat while immersed in thought. The rare, mysterious figure surrounded by black cloaks and numerous bones was none other than Horus, the 64th seat demon god. Horus held the power to lead 21 demon kings, and to burn everything he considered an enemy. The timing is bad. Ta-tap. Ta-tap. The sound of his fingers tapping against the throne reverberated throughout the wide, gruesome interior of the castle. However, before him, tens of thousands of devils were bowing before him. Before the appearance of the red moon, I should have purged the opposition. I miscalculated. At that moment, one of the demon kings carefully raised his head and said, "Lord Horus, if you give the order now, we will go into battle again." Horus stroked his jaw as he replied. How many feudal lords were affected? Exactly 76 feudal lords were affected by the moon and ran out. Feudal lord. That is to say, the aristocracy. He said the number was 76. It was more than he thought. If he thought of the subordinates beneath them, it was tens of thousands. Withdraw those guys' territory. Any fellow that is shaken from the red moon doesn't deserve to be under my command. However, Lord Horus. Among them, Duke Bastro is included. Bastro is. Horus frowned. If it was Duke Bastro, he was one of the most influential of the feudal lords who had married one of Horus's daughters, a king's son-in-law. Horus thought he had suffered great injuries during the fight between the demon gods' factions and was recuperating, but Horus didn't think he would be influenced by the moon and run away. Horus, who had been concerned briefly, spoke again. Withdraw. Things will have to be stricter. The regulations had to be strict. If they made exceptions, things would start to fall apart piece by piece. Things were like that, especially at a time like this. The demon gods were divided between those in favor and those opposed, and the two sides fought violently. The events that led to the great calamity became a controversy. Although the party in favor was much greater in number, each and every one of the demon gods were overwhelming beings. The usual formula of 1 equals 1 did not work at all. Horus himself had strength enough to defeat each demon god beneath his seat, but this imbalance of power held true for those above him as well, and the combined might of the lesser demon gods wasn't something to disregard. And so, if he moved hastily, there was the possibility of being hit with a counterattack. That's why even if he was a king's son-in-law, there was a need to establish discipline by using stricter standards. Gremory. Most likely her operatives are still around. I weeded them out to such an extent, but... Horus's eyes quickly sunk. He had no plans of showing weakness at a time like this. In any case, time was on their side. Since all that their opposition could do was block and run away. Crash! Horus rose from his seat. Wheeing. Depending on his movements, intense winds blew in every direction. During the time the red moon, organizing their internal structure would be a priority. That seemed to be the best course of action. Execute it immediately. At the same time as Horus spoke, the devils became excited. We will follow the order of the great Horus. We will follow the order of the great Horus. The great. A uniformed voice that struck from every direction spread. Devils were not only inside the castle, but outside as well. They numbered well in the scores of hundreds of thousands. Before long, hundreds of thousands of devils began to move in unison. Devils. Among them the nobles and their territories were in a very close relationship. In the case of the noble devils, they claimed an area as their own territory and influenced it, but if the red moon made the nobles crazy, the devils they ruled were bound to be agitated. Bastro was like that. Bastro and the 50,000 devils under him were like that. Today, I want to see blood. Bastro took 50,000 devils, and slowly marched south. In addition, together with the feudal lords that followed him, they were accompanied with an army of devils that was well over 100,000. Although they ate up all the monsters that they caught while they marched, their thirst was not sated. We need a stronger enemy. These kind of small fries won't work. For quite some time during the southward march, there was a monster that caught Bastro's eyes. A giant of fire. A fire tar. It was able to be called a top predator, and most importantly, they lived in groups. It was a very large area, but the owner of this area seemed to be a fire tar. Bastro's eyes glittered. Myung, who had heard Aaron's report, frowned. 100,000 devils. The scale itself was different. If a noble could move at that scale, he would have to be at least a count or higher. From the start a boss-level monster had appeared. And at the moment Myung found out about the devil, a screen popped up. The Duke Bastro. Count Archeope. Baron Alaman, Baron Arthur, Baron Elena. High-rank devils, 43. Mid-rank devils, 620. Low-rank devils, 96,300. It was about the size of the enemy. Most of them were low-level devils, but there were well over 7 noble-level devils. If it was a duke, it was the rank directly below Demon King. It was a strong person that one couldn't and shouldn't see easily. Fortunately, they didn't invade to seek out Myung's territory. He's waging war with the fire tars. Duke Bastro's objective was the fire tars. Since Myung's territory itself was a bit on the outskirts, there was a chance for him to overcome this crisis without being noticed. But that didn't mean he was going to let it pass. By helping the fire tars, he would be able to thin the number of devils that approached his territory. Lord, the devils have invaded. It was when Myung was calculating various moves. Baltan the territory guardian had hurriedly come in and spoken. Baron Alaman. He led approximately 2,000 devil soldiers and attacked Myung's castle wall. Kahaha. I'm in luck. I thought for sure I'd only end up scouting, but while I was getting bored this turned out well. Clang. Clong. The devil soldiers hurled huge rocks and used siege weapons to push the gates. After one huge shock after another, it seemed the gates would soon give way. However, no matter how much it was assaulted, it only shook, and the walls were not destroyed. Soon Alaman, who had been triumphant in the beginning, also lifted his head. The gate and wall were both so firm. So it's designed with magic. It's been made by dwarves. No wonder. What are the wizards doing? Quickly attack! Alaman, who identified the problem, shouted. Then, the 100 devils behind Alaman executed the orders. Kwaaya! Soon, countless magical attacks descended and struck the walls. This time it worked. The wall gave a huge shudder and a part of the upper section was swept away. It's fairly strong, but I, Alaman, cannot be stopped by it. Grrrrrrr. I'll kill you all. He couldn't resist his excitement from just imagining the slaughter that would begin in a moment. The moment when Alaman's emotions were heightened. Sweeek. Thump. Something fell from the sky. The large monster, Cerberus, and the evil spirit predator Taken. Of course, B. Sungmin and Myung were also present. 4 people blocked behind them. Kreeake. Soon the door opened and tens of thousands of soldiers appeared. In the lead were Baltan and Arund. So it seems like I can't avoid this. Swung. Myung smiled bitterly and took out anguish. I won't spare even one. As if he never smiled to begin with, he erased his expression. If during this there was a survivor, things would be complicated. He had to wipe them out in one go. Myung himself soon became a slaughterer. In any case, it seemed inevitable that he would bump into the devils. It couldn't be helped. If he couldn't avoid them, he had no choice but to kill them. Chapter 120, The Duke, Bastro, 2. TL, Nadu. Editor, Lee Suris. A red light shined on Muyeong's surroundings. As the Absolute's territory was proclaimed, it started to influence even the devil. Shik. However, the first to approach wasn't Muyeong. Sword 2 and Sword 3 suddenly popped out from Muyeong's back. Kai ha ha ha. Fine. Let's have a fight. Baron Alaman laughed out loud. He was currently drenched in the magical power of the Red Moon. He wanted to see blood and he would only be satisfied after seeing it. On top, he also had a boundless fighting spirit that couldn't be explained unless he was mad. The reason why humanity called devils a fighting species, the fragmentary example was in front of him. Not only Baron Alaman but the 2,000 devils in the surrounding were shuddering their bodies as they thought of the fight that would soon occur. The devils at this time are more like undead than undead. They fought until their last breath. They didn't even bat an eye even if a part of their body was cut off. Devils were a type of creature that forgot about pain when they were excited. It was the reason why humanity avoided the devil's long night even after the fight with the devils intensified. Even if the number was only 2,000, they couldn't be disregarded. It is a holy battle that participates in. Hunt down every last one of the enemy. Ahum. 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 Swoosh. Sahun smashed a devil soldier using his huge club. With that as a start, a fierce fight began. However, about 4 or 5 people were needed to face against one devil soldier. If there was something that was fortunate, it was that the quality of equipment the different species including the Dakibus were all wearing was greatly enhanced, incomparable to what they had before. It was the result of all the dwarves hammering day and night. Kaya ha 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 ha. This is the smell. The smell of blood spilled in battle is making me crazy. The thorns on Baron Alaman's entire body rose. The thorns stretched freely and pierced through those who he identified as enemy. Alaman took the blood that ran down the thorns himself and drank it. And as he drank more and more blood, Alaman's wings throbbed like a heart. His body was slowly getting bigger. Even more, it seemed like a few thorns were released. Sword 2 and Sword 3, aim for the knights. I'll take care of Alaman. After watching the thorns, Muyeong gave them an order. Even among the devil soldiers, there were 2 devils dressed as knights who were protecting Baron Alaman. As long as the 2 were present, it was hard for Muyeong to face Alaman alone. But, if it was Sword 2 and Sword 3, they should easily be able to fight against high-ranked devils. The fact that they have a noble position itself means they are top-ranked devils. It meant that they also had small authority. Baron Alaman's authority was precisely those thorns. Numerous thorns acted as a spear and a shield at once as they protected his body and pierced his opponents. Even more, as his body enlarged as he drank more blood, if Muyeong didn't stop him quickly, unpredictable levels of damage would occur. A noble's true strength is because of their authority. If he could see through the authority and destroy it, he could be no more than a high-ranked devil. A noble, a demon king, was like that. A view that perhaps it would be the same for the demon gods was predominate. A devil's strength wasn't simply due to the rank difference but due to their authority. That means that if he could nullify their authority, he could definitely handle them. Taken, clear the way. Trust me. I have faced devils tons of times. The evil predator Taken was normally a being living in the Azura path. It wasn't odd at all for a devil to be there in the form of an evil spirit. Swoosh. Afterwards, Taken moved quickly with his sword in hand and slew devils. His swordsmanship and movement were very familiar. In that short period of time, he made those his own. Sword 2 and Sword 3's specialty. He was able to replicate some degree of their swordsmanship and the way they ran. You could say that it was stealing, but because Muyeong knew how crazy it was to learn simply by watching, even Muyeong couldn't help but to accept it. Following the path Taken made, Muyeong ran straight. And using the flyability of the belt of Aries, he reduced the distance instantly. Clank! Anguish touched the skin of Baron Alaman. However, all it did was scratch it slightly. It was because the thorns interlaced his entire body like a form of armor. It tickles. Alaman laughed. Afterwards, Alaman smirked. A prey approached to get himself killed. I don't know why, but you're getting on my nerves, even amongst all the ones here, but it's good that you've come. The one who was on Baron Alaman's nerves was Muyong. From the moment Muyong appeared, Muyong was strangely on his nerves. Instinctively, it was similar to a repulsion. Alaman was planning to clear his surroundings and approach Muyong himself, but he just fell into his lap. How could he not laugh at this situation? It's hard to read his grains. However, besides Alaman's intentions, Muyong endlessly was trying to figure out Alaman. Everything has grains. If he could just find the grains, he could destroy even the toughest things in the world. But, because tens of hundreds of thorns were interlaced, it was quite difficult to read the grains on him. It would be endless for him to remove them one by one. There should be just one grain that could pierce through that entire armor. Crank! In an instant, thorns surged out and dispersed from Alaman's body. He barely blocked them, but as the thorns bent, it destroyed Muyong's entire scope of movement. Blaze! At the same time, he activated Dragon's Soul. Muyong's whole body was blazing with fire and instantly burned the thorns. After seeing this, Alaman let out an exclamation as if it was amusing. A dragon fire? Amazing! But, it's nothing compared to Orus's flames. Orus, the 64th seat demon god. It was unexpected to hear his name at a place like this. They are Orus's devils. One of the most dangerous demon gods. There were images that passed through Muyong's head. That guy. Only hell was left in a place where Orus passed by. Orus's fire burned every enemy. However, if Orus wanted, he could stop an enemy from dying while they burned from the fire. They could truly be burned forever and feel pain. And he was also one of the demon gods who acted to break the walls of the Blue Temple and kill Merlin. After the breakthrough, the great city was swept by hellfire and burned away some few thousand lives. I'm steadily moving forward. Muyong's lips made a slight curve. Muyong was truly moving forward for him to hear Orus's name out loud. He felt certain that the power of 72 demon gods was close to his reach. Baron Alaman was just the stepping stone. Clash! Clank! Numerous attacks repeated. Alaman's thorn armor didn't break. Are you only able to make ticklish attacks? Kaya ha ha! He laughed in Muyong's face. The number of wounds on Muyong's body was increasing. A dragon's fire couldn't burn infinitely. However, Muyong's eyes were continuously scanning Alaman's whole body. Just one grain. He just needed to find just one grain that could pierce through those thorns. Nothing else was important. I see it. Muyong's eyes sparkled. Muyong clearly found a strange grain at the moment when the thorns were released and extended. It was more close to a dot than a grain. A dot that joined all thorns. That was his weakness. It was the only flaw to Alaman's authority. At the same time, two horns appeared and Muyong's time slowed. Although it only lasted for a minute in real time, for Muyong, it felt closer to 4 minutes. In a world where it was slowed down by 4 times, Alaman's attacks seemed very slow. And by focusing on only that one dot, Muyong ran. Puush! Anguish accurately pierced through the dot. A strong repelling power was resisted, but he didn't care. Yuya bastard! As if Alaman also felt something strange, he withdrew all the thorns he released. Soon, every thorn approached Muyong aiming to kill him. Acceleration! An ability included in Hermes' boots. The world felt much slower. Although it was only for 3 seconds, Muyong's world played 5 times slower. All the muscles in his arms screamed out loud. His veins bulged as if they were going to pop out of his skin. Puuyu! Soon, the dot was pierced. How, my armor! Alaman spoke as if he couldn't believe his eyes. However, Alaman's whole body turned into ash before crumbling. Normally, devils didn't leave their body behind when they died. Like this, they became ashes and disappeared. The thorns that flew towards Myung also turned to ashes and dropped to the ground. Devils are imperfect. As he watched the situation, Myung once again reminded himself. Unless they were at the level of a demon god, he was able to place demon kings within the devil category. And devils were very unstable beings. Devils were a species that seemed as if they went against the laws of the world. As they weren't even able to leave behind their body after they died. Anguish cries in excitement. Blows against devils are now much stronger. Thud. Thud. Thump. Sounds of explosion continued all around. Even if Alaman died, the devils continued to fight. They wouldn't stop until every devil was annihilated. Ashes to ashes. But in Myung's eyes, they were already no different than ashes. He got rid of Alaman and his 2,000 devil soldiers. On the ground, only ashes were rampant. Of course, it wasn't like Myung didn't suffer any damages. Almost 6,000 people. While suppressing the 2,000 devil soldiers, almost 6,000 people died. Although the fight didn't pay off, it was quite an excellent result for their first fight. However, only about 24,000 were left. With this number, he couldn't reach Duke Bastro. There were even over 90,000 devils left that he led. If they were to just fight like this, the results were obvious. Myung's complete defeat. I must join forces with the Fire Tars. It seemed like it was time to make a decision. Like how Alaman found the castle in the outer parts, there was still a chance for other devils to find this place. In the end, he felt it was most effective to join forces with the Fire Tars to fight against the devils. Of course, whether or not the Fire Tars will accept Myung's offer was a different matter. Still, it was the best move. Even if Augur was to come forward, there would be a limit, and it seemed like regarding this matter he needed to think more about it. Afterwards, Myung took out a black marble from his side. It was the size of a fingernail, but the size of power within it was quite remarkable. When a top-rank devil dies, there is a small chance for a crystallization to appear. A crystallization was a marble condensed with a devil's power. When someone swallows it, their stats increase. They could also be used as a material for a weapon or an armor. But the best option was to eat it. Gulp. Without hesitation, he dropped the thorn crystallization inside his mouth. At the same time, all his muscles jolted. Name: Thorn Formation. Effect: covers the entire body with strong thorns. Asterisk physical resistance increased by 200. Asterisk magic resistance increased by 150. Asterisk when used, agility greatly falls, -60%. Asterisk it leeches a bit of the attacker's health. Pure stats and a skill were earned. Thorn Formation. Although it was a defensive skill, the skill itself was quite decent. As it was a skill made by an authority, there was no way for it not to be good. During emergencies, it seemed like it could be of good use. Although there was a flaw that agility decreased when used, if there was a situation for Thorn Formation to be used, it would probably be in a situation where he couldn't move too much.